Okay, it's time to get started. Welcome to my talk about Lupus Decoupled Drupal, component-oriented decoupled Drupal with Next.js. My name is Wolfgang Ziegler, or you might know me under my handle, Fago. I'm a managing partner and CTO of Tronomics, and I've done a couple of contributions in the past, so you might know me from my initiative to like get entity API improved in Drupal core. So I worked and contributed a lot to the Drupal 8 entity API improvements and also to the underlying type data API. And I've also done a lot of contrib modules in the past, so like popular Drupal 7 module, and nowadays also some Lupus Decoupled Drupal stuff, which I'm going to talk about here. So you find me on Twitter under the handle Fago, or on Mastodon, fago@drupal.community. So, like in this talk, like as was described, we really want to get hands-on with Lupus Decoupled Drupal. So I'll show you on how you can get started. So for that, we'll just basically launch locally a ddev project, and I'll show you around. So if you like, you can try to follow along on your own laptop. You will have to have a working ddev installation with Docker. But also don't hesitate if it's not working out. I like everything that I'm showing. I also have video recordings of that. So I will share the videos afterwards. So you can also take the time and try to reproduce it afterwards if you like. But before we do that, actually, of course, I will give you some background, some motivation overview what the whole thing is so that you have some better understanding of what we are doing. And I will conclude with some outlook. Okay, then why Lupus Decoupled Drupal? So actually, first, like in our company, Tronomics, we have been doing decoupled projects already like for many years. And that's basically the stack that we built up. And we have like an in-house distribution where we are all using this stuff already, and we contributed the key modules already years ago. But still, it was all very hard to use. You know, like with decoupled stuff, it's all like getting all those pieces together. There's so much different ways you can do things. And so it's really hard actually to get started easily. And that's what we are trying to solve right now with Lupus Decoupled Drupal by really providing an easy out-of-the-box experience, but which at the same time keeps the power of Drupal and combines it with a modern frontend. So the idea is really enable developers to use a modern frontend so they can enjoy using view components with Next and component-oriented solutions, but at the same time keep as much as possible of Drupal's power. And that's actually what led us to create that component-oriented approach. So what does it mean, component-oriented? So basically the idea of that approach is that still Drupal renders every page. So Drupal does the routing. Drupal is rendering. It's not render API anymore, but it's rendering with Symfony routing, but it renders the page into high-level components. Those like custom elements. And those custom elements, they map one-to-one to components on the front end, like in our case, view components. So it's like really a high-level rendering that Drupal does, but at the same time, with that rendering, all of the data that the frontend needs to render those components is already available to the frontend. So actually, afterwards, we figured this is a lot like Laravel Livewire, if you know that. So that component-oriented approach, basically, there they support multiple frontends. So you can use Blade templates or Inertia.js, then also with that combined Vue.js. In our case, basically, we only support Vue.js frontend. But that's like the default frontend that we provide. So the API is generally not limited. So you could do on your own frontend. So like it would be possible to do like a Twig frontend with singular directory components. Would be interesting. But like we are focusing on the Next.js stack that we are using, and we are providing that to make it easy to get started. But it's not locked to that at all. So when we are talking about custom elements, what do we mean with that? So like this is an example of custom element markup. You see basically it looks like markup, but the elements, well, they are custom, like it's teaser listing, article teasers, it's new. elements invented, and that's also like how nowadays all the modern front-end frameworks work. They basically allow you to introduce new components and to reuse the components via the custom elements. And that's the whole idea, also the module and the solution basically builds up. So how does that work then in detail with a decoupled stack? So in Drupal, basically you can still, if you like, just generate, like add your own route. And as mentioned before, it's integrated with Drupal routing, Symfony routing, so it just registers a new format, the format custom element. So you can just add your custom elements routes and do your own custom routes. And still, you can actually use the same paths as you already have. Maybe in your traditional Drupal site, there may be already a path, like in this example, /news. That doesn't matter if it's not a format, the two paths can coexist. And then you just have a controller, and then in the controller, you need to return a custom element. So the custom element class, basically it's the representation of a custom element. It has a name, it has a set of attributes with values, and it has slots. So slots are used for having contained content. So like when you build up the tree of custom elements, when you want to put custom elements inside of another custom element, that's what like a slot is used for. So and with that example code, it would actually give you, like with that module, it gives you that result. So you see, like the GET request, it goes to /ce API news. So that's basically an API prefix that Lupus Decoupled Drupal adds to make it more convenient to easily get the custom elements format of the response. You could also just do /news format custom elements, but that's just more convenient to work with. So we actually went with that. And then what you get for this news page is just like a JSON representation of your page. It contains some basic page metadata, like the title. There's also other stuff like breadcrumbs, meta tags, and stuff like that, which I removed here for brevity. But then you see the content. The content then is actually serialized custom elements. So this is the JSON serialization, which we're using by default. So this is the tree of custom elements you've seen before in the controller, just as JSON. That's the default we are going with in Lupus Decoupled Drupal. But of course, you can also go with the markup serialization, which in the beginning might be it's a little bit more natural if you are talking about it. So you see then more like how things would like from a markup perspective. But actually, from a front-end world perspective, it's easier to work with the JSON because the markup, you would have to pass that first. So that's why we're actually preferring the JSON representation like in the front-end. So speaking of the front-end, how would that look like in Vue.js? So like the custom element, as we had it before, here article teaser, you see it has an href, it has an excerpt, and if you jump to Vue.js, that's just the same. We have an href prop and an excerpt. So all of the attributes you just define as props, and then you have the values in the component, and you can use it. The component name must match the custom element name. That's how the system picks it up. And that's really, it's just that's everything. It's a regular Vue component, so you can use all the features of Vue, like it's Vue single file components. You can add your class, your style sheet, your JavaScript, everything directly in that single file component. It's really convenient to work with, really much like a regular templates. Then, like the other custom element, the wrapping one, teaser listing. In that case, we had a slot. So in this example, you see how you would do a slot in the Vue component. So generally, it works the same, like the title attribute just is defined as prop. And then the default slot is just goes into a property content, which is basically a JSON object. And this is this JSON of the custom element representation. And for that, there's like a helper function that you can just use. It's a Nuxt composable. This render custom elements, you just give it the data, and it will make sure to render it. And it will make sure that each custom element just gets invoked and gets rendered with the Vue component. Like in this case, teaser listing, it contains article teasers. So it will automatically then use this article teaser for rendering the article teaser custom elements. And that's really everything, that's how it works. Of course, like when working with Drupal, usually you don't program all your routes manually. There's entity rendering and pages working like out of the box. So for like every canonical entity URL pages, they are just supported when you install it. And you can also customize the custom element output of those pages. So there's like an API which is working very similar to like if you know the Symfony serialization API. There is like custom element processors, which you can, as a PHP developer, very easily implement to customize the custom element output for your entity. So there is also reasonable defaults provided. So if you don't customize the output, it will just do its default processing. But you're actually also working on some UI to make this possible to configure so that you have something like managed display configuration, also that you can, by view mode, also manage the custom elements display for your entities. So it's more straightforward and easy to customize the custom elements output when needed. Yeah, but that's everything about the introduction. Now I would like, let's jump into the code and let's actually try things out. So I will take a seat. Okay, the source of the whole thing is here, Lupus Decoupled Drupal. That's the main module which brings everything together. And here down there, like also from the further resources, there's also like the project template linked. And this is a project template which is used, it's basically Gitbot enabled and ddev enabled. So you can use that to have a working setup for new projects and to get started with that. So really what you need to do to get started is basically clone that into a new project. And then it has also like the further steps here documented, what you need to do for spinning things up. So with ddev, as usual, ddev start. So it comes with a working ddev configuration. And it basically contains all the regular Docker Compose setup for Drupal. And it also has some little lines of bash scripting to also clone a frontend setup. In this case, this is just a simple Nux-free demo frontend setup, which is also linked here. So it by default, it clones that. You can customize that easily via configuration. So as documented here. And let's see whether the Wi-Fi is working. Yeah, no, it's working. Just a little bit slow. So it clones the front end, and it also like automatically launches Nuxt within the container. So it runs in dev mode in there, which is most convenient for working with. And then it also needs to fetch the composer dependencies for Drupal. So let's see how that goes with the networking. Okay, not that bad. Then install Drupal. So this is just a regular standard installation for a new site. And then we just enable the Lupus Decoupled module. Like this is Lupus Decoupled Drupal. And this will also enable all the dependencies like it comes with and all the submodules that are needed. And preset its configuration. So you need to configure the front-end URL so that the integration works. And that's it, actually. We should be able to log in into our fresh Lupus Decoupled Drupal site now. You see regular backend. Let's try adding a node. Give it some image. And some example content. And save. And you see, for node view, it actually directly now redirects us to the front end. You see we have a working front end here. This is just a very naked demo setup of Nuxt, which you can easily customize. We have here working local tabs, so it has working authentication. It piggybacks up on the Drupal session. This here is the menu. We see just our image and the example content, so it's quite simple. So we can also like just provide a menu link, so then we'll also see the menu working, or like URL aliases. So you see that's just working. Okay, so how does that look from the front-end side of things? So this is the example demo of Next that we have. So there are a couple of components. So the components and the setup, basically, there's a Next.js connector module. It's a reusable Next module, which you can just install, which also brings a few components, it scaffolds into your project, and which you then very easily can customize. So we see here, for example, here is a component for the node, which it will just use by default for rendering this node. So we can this is a view component. It has a couple of props here defined for like optionally for some fields it supports. And we can just change things here and see it changed. Actually, it should support hot reloading. It doesn't work here because it's running within the Docker container. If you launch Next without Docker, that will just work. But we need to make it work with the ddev setup. So, okay. So when we go back to the admin UI, can actually show how the API for this looks like. So here is like a new operation to view the API output very easily. You see there's this CE API prefix, then here just comes the route. And here you can also just optionally select the content format, but JSON actually is default. You see here the page attributes it sends to the front end, like title, it supports Drupal messages, the breadcrumbs, the meta tags, and here goes the content, which is in the JSON serialization. And if I would go here with markup, then you see then it sends actually the content of the page as a markup string using that custom elements notation. So let's take a look at how this would look like when we would customize the fields of the article. So let's just add a new field quickly. Let's say an email, like a contact email address. And then let's also add a value for that. So now when we've done this and we take a look at the API output, we see here, now it added that value for that contact just by default. So like, that's the default is just for simple fields, it will just give you the values, and from the name, it will just remove that field underscore prefix to have it a little bit more nice. But that's the default set, you can customize that. And then in the front end, you see it's missing because like here our view component that does not output it. So we need to add here, actually add the contact. So we can here say contact is a new optional property. And then we are actually should be able to use it here within our template. So let's make a link. And here you can use also JavaScript literals to say like a mail to link to contact. And yeah, it's a contact link. And here we go, here's the link. It also, as you see in the bottom corner, it also has the right mail to address. So what about more complicated stuff? So we will get it started with this repository. So we also have the link in the presentation. But what about views? So views, basically, we also have some basic support. You can add new pages that render into custom elements. It's possible to configure to render individual fields or to render complete entities using view modes. So in particular, the entity rendering is really based upon view modes. It has then working pages and of course like all that kind of filter configuration and the things which are just running in the backend in views. And most of the work actually was contributed by Full Fat Things, like an UK-based agency who also working with Lupus Decoupled Drupal. So thanks a lot to them for that contribution. That's really great. There's also like work in progress block support that's not ready yet, and like something like exposed filter forms is not working at the moment, but that's something we plan to work on later on. But yeah, let's take a look at how that would work. Go back to the code. So this comes actually bundled in an optional submodule. So when we take a look at the Lupus Decoupled module, so it has like a bunch of optional submodules. We make this a little bit larger here. So there's also Lupus Decoupled views. So, and that one we are going to use now. But before we do that, we actually should have some content for views to list. So let's quickly generate some and add devel module. Oh, that doesn't need the dash y. Let's double generate. And then generate some content. So it added now some random 50 elements. Let's take a look in the backend. Okay, so we have some articles now. So we can start listing that. So for that, let's first enable the Lupus Decoupled views submodule. And then we can get started adding a new view. Let's call it articles. So we can build some basic article listing. So we only list articles. And here now we have a new views display plugin, custom elements page. So that's a page which just renders into the custom elements format. So here the format we also need to select. Here we want to render custom elements. And we want to, in this case, just render like a content in view mode teaser. Then the page needs a path. So we can just also say like articles here. And let's also give it a menu item. Okay, it also has a page already. Let's leave that with the default, save. And then we can take a look at the API it provides. So we just defined path articles. So this is the API output for our articles page. You see here it's the content. It contains here now a Drupal view element. It has some data it provides just out of the box here for paging, and then in the rows element, it contains all the content. And this is then for each node, it contains all the fields as the custom elements processor has it for that view mode. So if you have that customized for your view mode, it will just pick it up. In that case, it's just the default, so basically gives you all the fields again. So how would that look like now on the front end? So if you go on the front end, you see we have a new menu item. And we see some content here. So we have the images, and we also have some links. And if you scroll down, there's also a working pager. As I mentioned, paging, that just works. Let's take a look at how does that look in the front end actually. So in the front end, there are below global, there are all these custom elements, and you've seen in the API output, there's like Drupal view, and Drupal view gets rendered with this custom element. So this is a rather simple template. It just really renders the results, the rows here, as like that custom element that it gives it. And it also adds the pagination. Pagination here is another component. It's a little bit more complex, but it's also like having some default styling, which actually would work nicer with Tailwind here. So we can actually like try modifying that, like moving the pagination up. And we see, yeah, just changed it. So it's really straightforward also to customize and change that. So next topic, layout. So layout building, this is usually really like something, of course, when working with Drupal, if you have some editors, maybe marketing, you would like to have them being able to customize your pages. And for that, we built the actual layout builder support. You could also use paragraphs. Paragraphs is just entities, so that's straightforward actually. With layout builder, it's a little bit more complicated because it's rendered via the layout builder, layouts and everything. But the modules we contributed, they have built-in support for that. So the layout plugins, they are just rendered into a layout section custom element. And that layout section custom element, it just gets the plugin ID and the settings passed. So really you have full control in the front end on how to render your layout as you would like. And then the individual blocks, they may render into custom elements. So they are just rendered for in the pipeline. And then it's really up to the block on whether it actually provides custom elements enabled content. So if it's custom elements enabled, then it will make sure to keep up the support so it can be serialized into either markup or JSON. But if the block, like all of the core blocks, are not supporting custom elements, so in that case, it would just fall back to regular Drupal rendering and give you just the Drupal HTML. So if you would like to integrate that somewhere, then you get just the Drupal HTML, and you obviously would have to take care of like styling that in your Next.js frontend yourself, but it's doable. So in Lupus Decoupled Drupal right now, we don't have frontend previews for layout builder, which is something we really should add. We are using that in Dronomics internally already like for years. So we have like a solution for that, which is actually not that complex. So we just need to contribute that. So we are going to do that during the next couple of weeks. But basically, we can take a look at already at how it looks like for front-end previews. You just need to stay tuned, but there's also like an issue here which you can follow along, or if you want to help out, of course, every help is welcome. So let's take a look at how does that work. Again, there's like a submodule for layout builder support. So it's Lupus Decoupled layout builder. We enable that. And then we go into the backend to also enable layout builder for articles. Take some more space here. So we want to enable it only for the page view mode. And then we can manage the layout. But you see here, now when I manage the layout by default, well, Drupal shows it to you in the Drupal frontend, which actually in our case we are not really using. So usually what we just do is that we switch the default theme to the admin theme. Well, you can also make a layout builder use that. But since the Drupal frontend is not really used, it's the easiest to just switch it to the admin theme. And then you also get the layout builder here in the admin theme. Okay, then let's maybe take a look at, let's customize the layout first. Here it just adds all the default fields. Let's remove that. It's not so nice. And maybe let's keep the contact, so we have that. And now we can take a look at the API response. So if you look at an article, so how is that looking now? So here we see there's a custom element, as mentioned, layout section. It gets the layout ID. It's a one common layout here. It's used. It has no settings. And then in this case, well, there's just a lot of content which it pipes through. So this is a block which has no support to render into custom elements, so it will just give you the markup. So let's go to our test article and customize the layout. So here, well, here we still have the field to add the new comment. Doesn't make so much sense. Save that. So how can you do a custom elements enabled block? So for that, there's actually a small example module in this project, in this default project. So if you take a look here, so there's a small module, Lupus Decoupled Drupal example. And if you take a look at it, what it does, basically, it has some example controller and other things, but it also has an example news listing block. So this is just a really simple, regular Drupal blog plugin. And it just works the same way as you've seen it before for the controller. Basically, you just build up your tree of custom elements. But different to the controllers, you can't just directly return custom element object here. Since the Drupal block API, it expects a render array. So what you need to return is basically you just take your custom element and say to render array. So that's a very simple render array representation, and the custom elements rendering actually knows that and handles it intelligently. So that way you can return your custom element from the block, and then it will be picked up by the custom elements rendering. So let's enable that module so we can use that block. And let's add a block. Interesting. I think it's example. Yeah, example news listing. Here it is. So we add the block and save. And we don't see much. Why is that? So let's take a look at the API output. So here's the API output. We see here we have proper custom elements. We have teaser listing element, and we have the nested elements in the slot, article teaser. But for that to render, we need the view components. So this is like new custom elements. We don't have the view components in our frontend code base. So we need to add that. And actually, the module also provides example view components, which we can just use to get going. So we put that into our front end, into the global components folder. And I can also show you those components. So this is the article teaser and the teaser listing. It's basically from the example that we have seen before. And now when we Since we added this to our front end, now when we open the front end, we see the components rendered. So it's working. Okay, so that's actually like all the prepared examples that I have. So let's take a look at the short look at the project state and the outlook. So next steps, first off, launch Lupus Decoupled Drupal. So that step actually is done, it's online. So it's a documentation site which you can use to find all the information about Lupus Decoupled. Its content is not 100% finished, I would say. There are some rough edges we are currently working on to complete. So that's the second point, completing and improving talks is really what we are working on at the moment, but it already contains a lot of valuable information and also like a lot of explanations and examples you have seen in this presentation. Then also next step is to work on improved test coverage, also like to have more end-to-end testing support. So we would like to add end-to-end testing with Playwright, which runs on Drupal.org using the GitLab Action CI runner. So we have a better end-to-end test coverage and can like have continuously run that on Drupal.org. Then as mentioned, we are working on some UI for configuring custom elements per view mode, so for that output. So it basically can give you a sneak peek. So it's work done on the custom element module ECQ, and the idea really is to have an UI so that you can very easily customize the things that you typically need as a front-end developer. Maybe you want to map and like a node teaser to an existing view component, things like that. So some small things, you can just easily then do this with configuration. You don't need to start coding for small adaptations. But that's like work in progress, but I think it's gonna be like a really big feature to make working with the whole stack even more flawlessly. Yeah, then else we have really invested some time to make authentication working out of the box really nice and easily. So right now the setup relies on a shared cookie between two shared domains, but that's also not feasible for every approach. So we also like have an issue to even improve that a little bit more and to leverage API proxies of Nux3 to not have issues with cross-site requests. Then there's also an issue to work on form support. So actually form support is also something that we have working at Tronomics for years. And it also has working code in that issue, but we also like working on it to make sure it's working really good before we add it. So we are also like considering evaluating adding support for progressive form submissions with the help of Nux3. So this is about to come soon. And then, of course, finally, the big 1.0 release. And once we have achieved that, like the next step would be also like to introduce a mechanism for modules to easily provide view components. So if you think about it right now, when you in the backend, you add stuff, you always then, if you would like to package things up in a Drupal module, you always need to have front-end stuff as well. So we figured it would be nice to allow Drupal modules to provide some default components for the things they are doing and then make it easy in the front-end to actually copy that over into the front-end code base so that things are just working very flawlessly and easily. And then finally, full page editing with live previews would be a really great feature to have, like layout builder, as you have seen it right now. Like when you configure that in Drupal, basically what we're doing is that it just shows you the backend view, the configuration time view of all that content. But for a lot of use cases, it would be really nice and handy to also have like the front end view directly on the left side and just configure the things on the right side. So that's what we then also would like to work on and make really nice and flawlessly with the help of Nux and Vue.js. Yeah, so that's it. Here are some resources. Like as mentioned, Lupus Decoupled.org, the documentation site is up now. Then there's the Drupal.org project, Lupus Decoupled. Then there, as promised, also provided the video recordings of like all the things I've shown in this talk. So if you'd like to reproduce it locally, You find all the video recordings for all the examples that I've shown you on the lupusdecoupled.org/ddd23. Yeah, and of course, like there's more possibilities to get in touch. So like next session slot, there will be a BOF. So if you're interested, really, please join the BOF. It will be up on the second floor in Hörsaal 16. So if you have questions, would like to discuss, or like also if you're interested in, or need help setting things up, I will be also around at the code sprints and work on things. And we are always like around at Lupus Decoupled in the Drupal Slack. Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Is it on? Yeah. Thanks a lot for the session. I have one question on, so you showed a lot of examples of basically rendering and GET requests essentially. Where are those running? Is there like is there a place in Nuxt where these requests are being fired, or how does that work?
Where the GET requests are rendered? So
Yes.
basically the way it works, that every request, it doesn't go to Drupal, it goes to Nuxt, and Nuxt then just makes an HTTP request, also GET request to Drupal, it gets the content, and then it just renders the result. So it's really regular server-side rendering of Nuxt. And then since it's Nuxt, it's like universal rendering, so it also renders on the client. So it has basically the single page application mode where it then also renders client mode, client side.
Okay, yeah, that was my question. Thanks.
But since it's Nuxt, I didn't really mention that. It's really flexible. You can also do static site generation. So what's convenient for small sites, you can just have everything pre-rendered very easily. Or like then server rendering if you have more content. And with Nuxt Free, you can also do that serverless very, very nicely. Any more questions?
So just another question regarding mutations, updating data, deleting data. How do you recommend doing that with Lupus?
So basically, that's something that you could do, of course, over forms or like APIs. So it's sort of a little bit out of scope of the custom elements rendering, but of course, all the APIs that Drupal provides are still there, so you can just do that. Okay, then thanks a lot. Bye. Good.